guys for acknowledging and accepting Audrey's invitation to tonight's session about the Wootens and Hootens and how are we all related to these surnames. My name is Delbert Brown. I do live in Rochester, New York. My family migrated here from Alabama. So the core of my research is coming from Alabama, the Bullock, Barber, Macon, Pike, Montgomery area of Alabama. But this is about the migration of the family that were the Wootens and the Hootens to Alabama and beyond. And so my context I'm coming to you from is going to be enslavement. When our ancestors were enslaved, how we got separated, and the backdrop and the background of how to break through these brick walls of our relationships. So you should be able to see the results, right? From the poll.
Yes, I can see it.
Thank you so much. So out of the 13 people, 12 of you, of course, are Wootens, because this is from the World of Wootens Facebook group. If you find that you have DNA matches that you were aware of or newly discovered, then Audrey has this Facebook group called the World of Wootens, and that's the context for this presentation is presented to. So pretty much everyone in this group almost knows that they're Wootens, except one person. I think that might have been Donald. I might have saw someone doesn't know how they're connected to a Wooten, and that's okay. Hooten. Out of 13 people, only 2 were aware that they're Hootens. Only 2 are aware that they're Harpers. Only 1 person is aware, thank you, Donald, that they are Leslies or Leslies. And only 1 person is aware that they're Warlicks. And that's amazing because my goal is to bring you this background connection of where these names are coming from. Have you found your 1870 ancestors? Out of the 9 people who responded, only 4 have found them, and the others have not. And so generally, it will be a challenge for you to be able to find your ancestors through enslavement if you have not found them through by connecting them from the 1870 ancestors. So that's one thing that we want to try to break through. We want to try to help you to figure out how to make those connections. So now I will start. I'll share my presentation and we'll get started. If there is a driven question that you must ask, I'm willing to take that. But there's definitely going to be some names that may be new. There's charged to my head, not my heart. Because I do more enslavement research, because I know that we're alive, we can share and talk to each other. This is an opportunity for me to learn about you. And so definitely we will have an opportunity to share these different locations. I do have some presenters that I've asked to join the session tonight, and they're going to help me. These are some cousins that I found. They're going to help me give a background about some of these surnames where they have stronger knowledge in than I do. And I know that we connect, but you know, we all learn more together than separate. And I am not a person that knows absolutely everything. I do my best to know as much as I humanly possibly can. So let's get started. All right, welcome to the World of Wooten Surname Connections. With me, your host, Delbert Brown. So this is my GEDmatch ID. I have a few, but my ancestry one is HA677 1394. So let's get started. So tonight we're going to cover, this is a high-level overview of some of the topics we're going to cover. Steps to researching your family history. So because you're new to me, I like to start with some gentle basics while at the same time advancing to some advanced techniques. Types of research. Complicated, my typo, relationships due to enslavement, about DNA, approach to looking for enslaved ancestors, consanguinity defined. That became a new word even for me. And so I like to share that with people that I present to because it's something that I like to open up our minds to thinking differently, thinking broadly in our context of research. How are we Wooten descendants related to famous people? Why should we care? And let's look at our connections and then about GEDmatch and DNA Painter, which are tools that we want to be able to get the group to start trying to use to figure some of these connections out. So now this is my grandmother, the love of my life, my inspiration for all things in my life. You know, we all have strong connections to our grandparents. This is my grandmother. The photo on the left is a photo that I found while researching. Her family members that I discovered were out of South Carolina. And that woman astounded me when I realized how closely she looked like my grandmother's mother. But she would actually be a third or fourth great grandmother or grand aunt. I'm still trying to sort through that as well. But this is why we're doing this, right? We want to be able to discover all that we can about our ancestors. Now, DNA don't lie. It verifies. At the end of the day, we are blessed to be at a time and a period where DNA is allowing us to be able to put a finger and put a stamp of understanding and acceptance to what the truth really was. But the further back you go, it definitely becomes a lot muddled and confusing, but it don't lie. And so it sometimes it's challenging for people to accept it. But once we can get past that, the genealogy community, we understand the messiness that was in slavery, enslavement, and we've come to learn to accept and be okay with the truth. Let's stand on the word of truth. So I like to make sure I say DNA don't lie, it verifies. As to the levels of research that we embark upon, so we understand there's those beginners, people who want to just learn about the family, people who take DNA tests. So there's even levels to the taking of these DNA tests. So many people start with, I just wanted to find my origins. You know, Africa, what areas am I connected to? So people start there, but they don't realize it opens up so many doors for the rest of us when they take that test. And so we know we have people who take a test and they leave. I'm at a point in place where right now, I'd rather you took a test and left than not take that test. So there are the beginners. The intermediate people, now they want to start going past family. Let me start reaching out to cousins and new people and let's try to figure this thing out, right? And so now you're going to find you're testing yourself in more than one platform. You're going to not just do ancestry, you're going to do family search. GEDmatch, or not GEDmatch, but GEDmatch is an advanced one. You're going to do My Heritage, 23andMe. Some of us have taken a test there, whether we left, whether we're trying to figure out what they're doing. You're going to start taking tests in more than one platform. And that's at that intermediate level because you're still now wanting to learn a little beyond. At that advanced level, you're going to start analyzing the DNA itself and those matches. And that's where we start using additional tools like GEDmatch and DNA Painter and all these other different ways to figure out these relationships. So this is just a gentle picture of stating, you know, you're going to start building your tree based on those oral stories. What did they say? And then now from those oral stories, you're going to start looking for records. So, you know, you're going to start with census records. And census records based on what the family said is still very oral because the family shared their information to that census taker. Many times they shared what they wanted that person to know, and many times they withheld information they didn't want them to know. Because sometimes families were like, I don't want you to be in my business. So even though the law may have demanded or commanded that they take that, record that information, sometimes our family either didn't show up, they're not on the census. So there's still challenges that we have with even the census itself but it's our starting place. This is me in my research and where I am now. And so I literally, at a minimum, and you will be understanding this level tonight. I'm at 13 generations back, and I can go further. In my research, I like to take the enslavers' information as far back to their native country. And after that, I don't care because I need to see all of them who first came here to America so that I can figure out what was your story. So this is me just sharing you visually when it comes to just one of the Wooten line that would be my connection, what my tree looks like today. And it actually expanded when I started, I had to come back and look at the information that I thought I had. And I had to start now looking at the DNA matches when I was preparing this presentation for you. And it even opened up a lot more information than I had 2 weeks ago. So this is just that visual fan chart of my DNA and my lineage. Last year I discovered my paw was not my paw. Again, DNA don't lie, it verifies. And so the left, that's on my paternal side. So I had to start building paternal matches. So the uniqueness for me that I thought was my paternal lineage is Jamaican. It's Jamaica and in the UK and England. And so I had to start fresh all the way from what I thought I knew and build up this connection to the left. And I know many of them, that kind of thing. But the thing of it is sometimes when the truth hits you, you just got to pivot. So the first place we started our research is local. That's going to be with the family. We're going to start local, one town, one county, when we first get started. Now, the types of focused, concentrated research, I like to say, once we stop with just the family conversation, now we're starting to look at state records and wherever our research is, we're needing to understand all the people in that particular state. This is just a visual of a lot of the southern states, but we're going to focus our research statewide. And then once we advance beyond that statewide, once we've gotten a little bit out of that census, now we're starting to look regionally, especially when we're looking at periods that were enslavement areas pre-1870, even pre-1900 tumultuousness that was those times. We still are looking for records to help support the information that we have been told or that were found. And then now we're looking nationally. And so now that's where the Wootens are everywhere, right? They're across the nation, they're even overseas, which later now that is that international research. So there's levels that I want to make sure we understand in our approach to our research, that these are the things that we have to do. So now, types of families. One thing I wanted to be able to make sure I highlighted, because, I was in trying to understand these different complexities that occur with families. It's rare or probably non-existent to have a family that have the same parents for all the children for all generations. That didn't occur. That doesn't occur. That doesn't exist. There are many families that have step families, second parents that are in that family. And so these families are complex. So there is no pure family. And that was just something that I wanted to make sure that I got an understanding of being able to say that doesn't exist. So some of us have heard the term endogamy. And endogamy is that conversation where people have lived in the same place, but they purposely thought they were going to purify their family lines by intermarrying within their family. So let's make sure we understand this is a a chosen decision to intermarry family. And many times, many of us understand that was with the Jewish line, but a great deal of that was because they wanted to purify their family lines. That's endogamy. We understand that there are many multiracial families. So that's another thing that has caused our origins to look very vast and different. Um, Purposed post 1900 and not purposed, pre 1800 through enslavement. We have a lot of Scottish, European, a lot of origins that came about because of slavery, and I'm mostly talking about that enslavement period. Okay. Now, tracking our enslaved ancestors pre 1870 using DNA. So this is a chart that I wanted to be able to share about DNA because sometimes I believe, and it was something I had to get an understanding of when it came to what was DNA, right? DNA is distributed starting from our parents. We know we get a set number of chromosomes from both of our parents, right? And they're distributed to the children. Well, those children do not get the same number of chromosomes in the same positions. They're getting random chromosomes, each of us. So that means that sometimes I'm related to someone when my brother is not, and vice versa. Men, men get more DNA than women. So it's wonderful and phenomenal for men to test because they do get, whatever the scientific reason was, more DNA matches than women do. So my brother, if he did nothing else for me, he tested. And I have so many more matches through him than I have for myself. So it's great to be able to have DNA options where you can compare with a random variety of people. And so sometimes people will say, I don't see you in Ancestry. There's reasons why you may not see a DNA match in any testing platform, especially Ancestry. Ancestry, prior to about 7 years ago or so, I'm understanding we could see all cousins, all chromosome, all levels, all centimorgan levels. And then they decided, due to demand of some of their customers who didn't want to be contacted, they now add a calculation to those numbers called timber. And so now we don't see those lower matches. They're called noise. Well, as we go further back during enslavement, they're not noise. You just have to do the work to substantiate those matches. And so where I am literally researching smaller centimorgans because I'm researching enslavement. Identifying your DNA matches. This is just that conversation that I was mentioning about triangulation. That means I may match cousin A, but cousin 2 or cousin B may match my brother, but that does not necessarily mean we're not related. And so we have to think broadly. If we don't have more than parents and aunts, my family, the elders refuse to test. Refuse. And I asked, what are you running from? If they were going to catch you, they would have used my DNA. And now that I've gotten my cousins to test, they will use our DNA. If you have children out there, they would have contacted me because I've tested 19, 20 years ago. And so regardless of what our elders' decisions are, they refuse to test. So in this genealogy community, I like to say, I receive those and love on those who are willing, and there's all that we can do, right? That's all that we can do. So I'm grateful for those of you who've come tonight, and I'm grateful for those who've tested. And then we get to a place and a point where once we now need to validate beyond some of these testing applications like Ancestry, we do need to go into other testing platforms like GEDmatch, like DNA Painter. I'll share a snippet of that at the very end to help you to understand why it will be phenomenal for you to have a GEDmatch ID, and how your group, being the Wootens, and the number of you, 2,000 members that are in this group, if a vast number of you start using these platforms, you will really start getting an understanding of the matches that you don't understand today. This is a picture I'm sharing about the distribution of DNA. And this is down to 1 centimorgan. So on the website DNA Painter, there's another website that they took this from. They've done the calculations to say, hey, if you're 1 centimorgan, have a 1 centimorgan match, that person could be a third cousin or all the way to an eighth cousin. It's random. It just depends on the number of centimorgans that you received from that ancestor. The further back you go, those ancestors are fighting for position on our DNA, 23 chromosomes. They're fighting to give us their distribution of those centimorgans. So that just basically means that's why our matches are random. I shared a comment on Ancestry Facebook last week that said, I like to see last year up to last year where Ancestry would say, hey, this is a fifth to eighth cousin. Oh, no, this is a fourth to sixth cousin. Because that would say to me where to look for the connection I have with you. But now those fifth to eighth cousins are all lumped into fourth to sixth cousins predominantly. So what that does is it kind of throws you off with trying to figure out how am I related to you, because it can be vast. There definitely are ways to figure that out. But I wanted just to be able to share that before you can try to look at low centimorgans and GEDmatch or any other tool, there is work and a foundation that you must do. And so that's one reason we're having this conversation tonight. Because the devil is in the details. We must look at the big ancestral picture in order to understand our connection to slavery and through slavery. Now, when you do start wanting to understand that enslavement connection you have to many of your matches, or you're trying to understand this Wooten name and how are you even related to this name, the first thing that you should do as a best practice is first you should research the enslaver. As you begin looking for enslaved ancestors, but how? You start building a tree for their family. And that tree needs to include everybody as best you can. Now, I understand that there's a lot of people who have trees out there you don't know if you should accept. And I understand that, but we have to go every one of our trees are working trees, right? We're constantly trying to figure this thing out. So it's constantly evolving. So don't consider your tree to be a hard and stone thing. Because like I said, I did this presentation 2 years ago, and now I just have shifted my Harper match because of some DNA matches that I had that I wasn't expecting. So your trees are constantly evolving. Don't be afraid to add someone because you can delete them just the same when you find more information. There's ways to vet if these trees are accurate. You can use Wikitree, those kinds of things. There's a lot of tools that are out there to help us to substantiate these families. But you want to build a tree for that enslaver, for the name that you're researching. So I'm sharing here that this was a will. After you build the tree with all of their names, you're going to see when they died, where were they, and then you're going to go look for those probate records. Because that is where we exist. That's one place we exist greatly. Is that once they died, they shared the names of their property, which was our ancestors, and how the slaves were distributed. And that's when you start understanding the names that we are all connected to occurred because slaves were gifted, sold, shared amongst the family. And what I had in that picture to the left was where it says, was Bradford? Well, Benjamin William Wooten, wife was Frances Bradford Wooten, but she was a Bradford. So what was the likelihood that Frances brought slaves into that marriage? And so therefore, and when she brought slaves to that marriage and then he relocated or he moved, that we could be related to Bradfords who were left behind. So this is how you start thinking out of the box about trying to understand a lot of those DNA matches. Hardy, Mr. Benjamin, two of his daughters, one daughter, she married someone named Hardy, and another daughter married someone named Jones. Depending on the period, depending on the time period, when he died, did he have slaves go to his children? If he didn't, then you start looking at the sons and seeing when the sons died, what were the names of the slaves. So after you start with what you can, the next level I would say is build a tree of the enslaver, because then you start revealing more information out of the records. Ancestry has done a better job than years past, where I'm able to see more references to probates and wills. And so if I don't do anything else, I'm going to go look for these wills and I'm going to read to see if there's any slaves listed. So this is a conversation about the consanguineous relationships, complex relationships derived during slavery. And what is consanguinity? So this is my crude interpretation, but here we go. So we have a slave, an indentured servant or a slave. She is in green, she's 2, and the enslaver is number 1. So the enslaver has family with his wife. He's living his life, he's doing his thing. Then he decides that he wants to have slaves or children with or sex with the slave. And so now that slave has children with the enslaver. So we understand that relationship, that we're going to be related to the children of the enslaver because that would basically be an ancestor of ours. But what happens a great deal of time, especially for those of us on this session, is that when he decided to separate this, the slave, our slave ancestors' family, some remained, as an example, in Georgia and never left. They can say, my family has been here for hundreds of years, right here in this place. And then they start finding themselves really related to a lot of the white people that are in that same location because they never migrated away. But now you have those slaves that were sold away, gifted away, where those families migrated to Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, because a great deal of times the enslavers' sons especially migrated away, or the daughters married someone who went to another state or another county, but the slaves are now separated. And when they marry, they're changing names. And so now we're not realizing that we're connected to these names because of this separation. And so now basically, and so here for this consanguineous mating, basically what's happening is those families that remained in Georgia, or let's say even the ones that went to Texas, by 1900, 1950, we're believing that we're not relating to these people without realizing we got separated so far back ago that we are in fact related. And it's trying to prove it and trying to figure that out, which is make this complex. So this is just that conversation that A plus B plus C are all related, even through the separation. And a great deal of that separation occurred more in slavery, early parts of enslavement, than latter. So the difference between consanguinity and endogamy, they purposely wanted to marry family. We did not. You know, when I first started, before last year, when I started really thinking about the dynamics of these relationships, I had to say to myself, I had said, even on a Facebook page group, we did not purposely marry family. We did not marry family. To some extent, that was true. Later, you will see how my ancestor was a breeder. She had no choice. And so, therefore, where all these names are coming from, basically, it's just a sign of that time. Okay. Breaking through the brick walls for the Wooten descendants. So, some areas of concentration. I added a few more after Audrey did a live tonight, and she shared North Carolina, or she shared, I think I added on here, Tennessee and Mississippi. Um, my research is more enslavement, and again, I don't try to find absolutely everyone unless I have a reason. But yes, we are relating to each of us who are living across the country in all these different places. The question is for us to figure out how. And as I'm saying here, the how. So I want to share a little fun thing that I discovered while doing this presentation. Famous people. You know, I'm that person I could care less. They're not gonna call me and offer me some money. They're not gonna say I can't call them up and say, "Hey, cuz," you know. But there's a reason why it will matter to know who these famous people that you are related to. So once you've done your DNA, or especially once you've created your tree, and you start using all of these different tools, well, Family Search has a tool called a website called Relative Finder. It's on relativefinder.org, I believe, and you have to sign in with your Family Search account. But once you've signed in, you would download your tree from wherever you created your tree, upload it to Family Search. Many people use Family Search to build their tree because it's free, unlike having this monthly subscription with Ancestry. My Heritage and some other tool, FTDNA, is using My Heritage tree. Having these trees in all these places, these people really need to talk because it's difficult trying to manage all this data. So years ago, I uploaded a tree, maybe last year, to Family Search because I was in a group that was using Relative Finder. And I wanted to know who's the relatives, are we related? Would it show me that? But one thing I realized, I went back to it for this presentation and I said, okay, let me see if there's any famous Wootens out there that at least I could say I'm related to. So, famous Americans, Wild Bill Hickok. I do strongly believe that's Wild Bill. The name was actually James Butler Hickok, but it was probably Wild Bill. And what I'm highlighting in red and black, basically under the eighth cousin, 6 times removed, I don't care how far back, DNA is DNA and one drop is one drop. So Wild Bill, you have me on the left and him on the right. And then it starts to share how the ancestors that we're sharing collectively together. So Mr. Gristle Barnes had a wife named, this is a female. Gristle Barnes is the female. The husband was John Baker. And then there's another husband, Thomas Baker. Okay. So she married these two Baker men. And I'm connected to the John Baker side. And he's connected to the Thomas Baker side. But where he and I match is that most likely one of those women, for me, one of the white ancestors connected to a Wooten. And he and I both are related through the oldest ancestor. And so this is showing how through my tree lineage, how I'm related to famous people. Reginald Vanderbilt, another famous person, or the Vanderbilt family. Andy Williams, Muhammad Ali. I found that kind of interesting and cool, but okay, so Muhammad Ali. So then I was looking at his line and was like, where is that connection that makes us related? But Muhammad Ali would relate to me because I'm a Wooten and we're sharing the same common ancestor. Our common ancestor goes back to the name Pierce and Pippin. So that means sometimes if I search DNA matches for the name Pippin, would I find one match? If I searched for Pierce, would I find matches? I in fact did. And they were European matches with no African. And now I can have an understanding of why am I matching them. But one of the things you'll want to do, and I'll continue, is you got to add these people to your tree. And I add them to my tree because they will help strengthen the DNA matches that you have that you don't understand where they're coming from. Elvis and Lisa Marie Presley were sharing the same common ancestor through the last name Lewis and Proger. Kroger. Jerry Lee Lewis. Our common ancestor is Lewis and Morgan. Entertainers. Johnny Cash. Our common ancestor is the last name Drake and Marianne Ray. Richard Red Skelton. Last name Cutler Dowdy. So what I do, as I look at their lines, I'll go in Ancestry or the testing platform and see, do I have matches with these last names? Because this is how I'm going to be able to figure out where those people are coming from. David Bowie, Karen Carpenter, Patsy Cline. Yes, I'm dating myself, because if you know all these names, which you should, we're cousins. We're from the same generation. Tom Petty. His last names were Dymoke and Reed. 1490, 1489. How do you go far back? This is one way that you can. If your tree is found through research, through proper records, and if you look in my line under Francis Bradford, I do have Bradford matches. I'll share that. I have none and none, because that means that I'm still trying to figure out the slave mother to Agnes, and then the slave mother to Agnes's mother or Agnes' grandmother. So we're still trying to fill in gaps. Don't let the need to fill in a gap stop you. Just write unknown and keep it moving. But you're building the structure of your tree based on the research that you're discovering and that you found. Declaration of Independence signers was Charles Carroll. This was very important to me as I researched the Maryland area for some of my lines. And now that I can say I'm DNA related to this Carroll name, build that proper tree up, and then looking for the records. Another thing that I do is I use these names in these locations to know where to look for records. Because in those records were deeds, or different states have different names, but that's where you need to find if the slaves were sold to someone else. There is going to be a bill of sale. In the Alabama Southern area, it's called deeds. Maryland, it was called a tax record. So different areas call them different things. But now I know what name I need to be investigating and looking for records to see the connections. Benjamin Harrison, the Harrison name is another name that's important to me in that Maryland area, Maryland, Virginia area. The Constitution signers, Pierce Butler. I was like, okay. But again, he's connected to me through the same Wooten Bradford connection. U.S. presidents. Haven't found Jefferson. William Henry Harrison. So the other Harrison, who was a Constitution signer, must have been a relative. Brother, uncle, I haven't looked into it, but he's related. Coolidge. Coolidge shares with me this Wooten connection up to the last name Baker. And Elizabeth didn't have a last name, but Simmons, Symonds, Capon, Capen. George Bush. Okay, I guess George Sr. and Jr. They fall up with a connection to me through the Wooten name. Harry Truman. Stephen Grote Cleveland. Chester Arthur. Those were the famous people. And the justification for why you want them in your tree. Now, do you or we descend from free persons of color? So this is a conversation about, there's an online website called freeafricanamericans.com. That website, the gentleman chronicled all the indentured servants that came to America as free people, white, black as well, who were not enslaved. But then they they chose to be together and to have children. Thus, the birth of mulatto children. And when that occurred for that time period, They were like, wait a minute, wait, what's going on? Because children who were born of women would carry the birthright of the mother, pretty much like we do today. But if the mother was free, the child is free. And when that started occurring, these children being born, they were like, no, 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 we can't allow these children to be free. So the indentured servants came here with a contract to work for 7 years. Well, when she chose to have children by uh, Africa, a black person, they added 7 more years to her term and 31 years to her children. And now those children have to know they were supposed to be free, wait another 31 years to fight for their freedom because their birthright dictated that they should be free. So one of the things I was able, because I had started researching this with another group, though there is a Wooten line out of Virginia that Tom Wooten, a mulatto, ran away. Well, of course, the question is who is Tom's mother? Because he was identified as a free person of color. I have not researched this to connect to see is this Wooten line connecting to us, but this is a part of the research that we do to try to figure out our information, our ancestral lines. But the area is York County, Virginia. I'm trying to see, and many times the children were separated in the family, and so and sometimes sent to different states. So this is just a resource to look at once you start looking at Virginia relationships to try to see if these dots can be connected. Another great thing we could do is we could always search Ancestry for names in a location and see if anyone has these names in their tree. Because if someone has these names in their tree, now we're able to see what they have and how could it line up with what we have. And this wasn't as far back as the previous conversation, 1400s. This is the 1700s. Wood, that's another name that I'll be sharing later, but Wood is were identified as free persons of color in Virginia is one source. Rachel Wood was white servant of Ingalls in York County. The court convicted her of having a mulatto female child. So it's amazing that someone has already done this work to chronicle this for us. But if you have connections to the name Wood, then this would be something you'll want to consider because for me, I do. And if I do, you probably do too in some roundabout way. But we'll talk about that soon. And in Maryland, there is another name Wood. I didn't look in South Carolina's to see if these names were there, but that resource again is out there for you, whatever your surnames are. It's a phenomenal resource tool to see if we descend from free persons of color. Because I did an exercise with another group, targeted that location, and because it was a Maryland location, and I looked to see every name that had ties to that location. And we would search Ancestry to see if we have matches, and many of us did. So now that we can see we possibly may descend from free persons of color, and now we can share trees or share information to try to see if we can figure this out. And this was another Virginia slave freed after 1782, Edward Wooten in Virginia, Frederick County. Then later it's saying an instrument of writing Mary Wood to Negroes. So now we're seeing a name Wood being connected to the name Wooten. I have also seen the name spelled Wooten, T-T-O-N. So those are just variations we know exist that we want to be mindful of. So now what I want you to do is I'm going to bring up a name and I want you to search and see if you have DNA matches. We already know you guys are going to have Wootens, but hey, you can appease me. But then the rest of the names, we'll check those out. So this isn't a name, but this is just a gentle reminder. When you look at your DNA matches, never assume just because someone looks like that they are. Look at the origin. I've now added looking at the origin of my matches to see if they have any African descent. Because if they don't, then now I know where to position them as a possibility in my tree. Because that could mean someone in that family connected with the slave where their line did not. We're still related. Still related. So she was a Wooten match that I need to investigate. And that 1% basically goes to show that so far back, someone was a free person of color that connected to that line. And I think I have a suspicion where this could fall. And we'll talk about that soon. So this is my line as a closer shot of my ancestor Agnes. Was Agnes. I gave her every name that she needed to have. Hooten, Wooten, Harper. So searching for DNA matches to Wooten. You all know that line. That's your line. But this is what my line looks like, right? I don't have a lot of matches. But as long as I have one, I'm happy. Because that one person can be investigated outside of the need of another tool like GEDmatch. So I believe Audrey or someone in the group messaged me because I shared on the Facebook group my GEDmatch number. And they were like, wait a minute, you are matching Sean Burris. And I knew the name. And I said, okay, I am. So these are some other people. I love to see Michelle Holland. She's in Rhode Island. She put her GEDmatch numbers up here of her whole family, which was an amazing visual. So I went and threw them in GEDmatch to see was I relating to her. And later you'll see how GEDmatch, we can see the tree like ancestry. So when you're using another tool, make sure you add your tree, because if you don't, we're dead in the water. But for Sean, as I looked at Sean's tree in GEDmatch and Ancestry, because he is a match to me on my maternal side in Ancestry, our connection goes back 11 generations to Richard Wooten as that position, strong possibility. So Sean has matches that go all the way through the last name, Burris, German, Pace, Armistead, and then that line that was Pace connects to Wooten. So what this basically means is, do you have any Pace matches? So even though you're not searching for Wooten because you're comfortable with Wooten, as we're looking at our matches, you'll want to look at the tree line that they're displaying to see, do you have matches to them? Because that is where your common ancestor is going to live. But when you don't have your tree built further back, you don't know. So that's why, especially when you don't have your tree built further back, download your tree, add it to Family Search so that you can look and see what Relative Finder shares with you and add those people. I don't care if it's but 2 or 3. You want to add them because they're going to help you figure out the common match you have with someone else. Sean and I share a white connection. We don't share the same enslaved ancestor or the same common ancestor of a grandparent. But he had Maycock, Noller, German, Carter, and Burris in his line. So now I want you to search for the name Sweatt or Sweet. I think it's pronounced Sweet. So Sweet, I want you to do a DNA search because many of you are not familiar with that name. So Mr. Edward Wooten, and I will share how I'm DNA related to other than the Europeans do the research of me. I'll be honest with you, whether it's Edward, whether it's a whole nother son, personally for me, I don't care because I'm in that same family line, right? Until I find records that say such, until I find a family member that says such, I have to go by their ages, their location, and to my best guess, figure out that person is possibly that strong connection. But Edward Wooten is the oldest European ancestor that I have. He was in Charles Parish, Virginia. 1776 was his birth. He aligned with my ancestor who was an 1805 birth. So that's why I chose him. He couldn't have been a son. they were born after, right? So Edward Wooten had a son named William Lloyd Wooten. So we're going to take a look at William's line. So when I looked at William Lloyd Wooten and I started looking at other people's trees, I saw this Rena Rainey Sweatt Jones Wooten. And my DNA matches to the name Sweat or Sweet was Beverly, Norris, and a young lady named Tara Powell. This Wooten connection through Tara, which I found interesting. So Tara, in her line, had a male Sweat, who a female named Sarah connected to Edward Wooten and had an unnamed Wooten child. That unnamed Wooten child married Betsy Copeland Sweet. So if I'm related to these Sweets, Copeland could possibly be a match if that's your line. But where I find my connection to Tara was through this slave that was a Sweet because of Beverly. Beverly pushed my thought process of I'm relating to the Sweets. So I got to make this make sense because I'm a Wooten connection. And so I had to figure out which Wooten did the deed in order for me to figure out my connection to the last name Sweet. So if Beverly's not here, I'm going to have another connection here. This is Beverly's line. And Beverly's line through Wooten and Sweet goes all the way down through her line. So this is what she had in her tree. And so taking Tara and comparing that with Beverly, this is how I was able to figure this out. Not to mention, I'm still relating to Bradfords, and now I'm relating to Sweets, and the Bradfords are the Wooten, the European Wootens. So the Sweet line has to be connected to Wooten. And so we have to line it up to make it make sense. So I want Norris to share with us this conversation about the Sweets. The Sweets, what is the backstory that you guys know about the Sweets and the Wootens?
Okay, so the backstory with me is my Sweet connection is in Georgia. That's Sweets and the Thomases are come in. My group Thomases migrated from they were taken from Georgia to Texas. That's what my understanding is for the for my connection to the Sweets and the Rainies.
And the Rainies, that's in her line too. Okay.
Yeah. So the Wootens are connected to me through my father and my mother. And they were in Cass County, Texas, which is right outside of Shreveport, Louisiana. So to make a long story short, they were brought to East Texas from Louisiana.
Louisiana.
Yeah.
By way of Georgia.
Yeah, they were in Georgia and Alabama. And you mentioned the Powells. Something about the Powells are connected. They're in Alabama. They were in Alabama. The Powells were. That's okay. The Powell connection. They were in what is the name of it? They were in the Mobile area, which is Monroe County, Alabama. That's the Powells and the Woots and all of them were brought to Texas by way of that's what I know about the Rainies and the Wootens but me and Beverly share the same grandparent on the Rainey side.
Okay.
Yeah. And I know the Rainies, I know the Wootens, and the Thomases. The Thomases are I'm related to them also. So that's where all that. And over the years, they intermarried with each other, so it gets confusing. So you have to watch out for that too.
Gotcha. Okay. Bradley, if you could give me a minute. I'm asking any question, put it in the chat. There are presenters that are going to share their background as far as what they know that I knew. There's a lot of information, so I just want to try to get through the information without derailing with questions. So give me a minute, please. Okay. So next, so this was Norris's connection to me. Norris' connection to me, it's not through ancestry, it was through jet match.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I did not have jet match, I would not believe or know that I was related to him. I would be basing it on theories or assumptions. And then
Yeah.
there is this young lady here, Ariel Hines. She's on my maternal side for Wooten in Texas. I have one match out of Texas. So, these are the things that when we get together, when we can talk with each other, of course, we can try to figure out these connections. I didn't know I had any Wootens in Texas. So now I know I could torture Norris up there. We're trying to figure that out as a possibility. We share trees with each other. Sometimes we'll share DNA. I definitely use DNA with being able to help cousins figure out their connections to me. Okay, so my direct connection to the Wootens and the Hootens. So this is where I'm drawing for you guys these other connections. So the theory is that Agnes Hooten, she's not a theory, she is my fourth great grandmother that I was able to find. She born in Georgia, lived in Bullitt County, Alabama, and then after 1870, she went to Montgomery with her son and the family. And until the DNA, I could only go by what the census said. The census in 1870 doesn't tell you parent relationships. They just have the family in one house. So it looked like some of the children were her daughters or their fathers. Until I did this research for you tonight, I had to second guess and realign this Harper name, for instance. So, yeah, Agnes is getting realigned. So Agnes Hooten. Basically, I feel strongly she was a breeder. She had a daughter named Rena Harper who married a Scott. Then she had two children by the name of Hooten, Willie Ann Hooten, George Washington Hooten. Then she had my ancestor, my third great grandfather, who was a Wood. And then she had a daughter with the name Leslie. So this is one reason I asked you about all of these different names, right? So let's check this out. So I'm going to read an article that was shared with me. So Tiffany and I are researching out of Bullitt County, Alabama. So these are some locations you're going to want to make a note of in Alabama and in Georgia. There's many other locations. I'm not strongly versed. If I look at your tree, I can see the connection. But the strong verse that I have is these locations on the screen here. So Bullitt County, Alabama. So backdrop information on Bullitt County. It was derived out of Pike, Barber, Macon, Montgomery, and one other little county, I believe, was called Henry. After emancipation, the white folks didn't want to have to go in town. They wanted to be able, because that's where the slaves were mostly living and congregated. So they created Bullitt County, and they were considered living in the suburbs, in the outer areas or the towns. So Bullitt County was created after emancipation. And so for those of us who have family that was born and lived in Bullitt County, enslavement, there quote unquote were no records there. We would have to figure out and research all of these neighboring areas to figure out our family members. And because the enslavers had family and children living in all these other areas, it was still the same family. So these are some, if you have Bullitt County at all, you're going to have matches, especially in Pike County. That was the largest county where slaves were living. Carved out of Pike, became Bullitt, but it still was the same family in the same locale. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of this area because this is the area that I'm coming from. Jefferson, Georgia, my goodness. I just was able to help Tiffany to be able to expand her thinking. She's going to be talking in a few minutes about of the Hooten connection that she is aware. So she has had to educate me. But when I looked at her tree, I had to educate her on a connection she had that she was not aware of. So this is the power we have in sharing information with each other. But Jefferson, Georgia, I'll tell you a side surname, which is Wigham, Whigham. If you have one match to Wigham, I got you. Because these families eventually, over the course of 20, 30 years, as they became free, as they were able to move around, who they connected with is who they connected with. But that's how Jefferson, the Wiggums and the Hannahs is a line that she didn't realize she had a connection to, but she does. Okay, so Tiffany shares. So this is a backstory I want to share before I start talking about those Alabama, Georgia Hootens. So the newspaper article says, ran away from the subscriber, $150 reward in Jefferson County, Florida. On the night of the 14th instant, my man, Charles, about 35 or 40 years of age, rather a dark mulatto, about 5 feet 6 or 8 inches high, trim built and well proportioned. He wore a long beard, but he may have taken that off. However, is a very sensitive fellow, speaks slowly, and is by trade a blacksmith. Charles was brought from Alabama to Thomas County, Georgia, near a year ago, by James B. Hooten, and sold to me a few months since. The said Mr. Hooten left Thomas County, Georgia, with his family and Negroes, and among the latter was Charles' mother and several of his connections, for Montgomery County, Alabama, on the morning of the same day that Charles left at night. And Charles, too, having left without any provocation, would seem he is aiming to follow them back to Alabama. Whilst formerly owned by the said Mr. Hooten, I am informed he was hired to and worked for the following persons in Alabama, viz. Henry Hicks of Macon County, Francis Freeman of Montgomery County, John Merritt of Lowndes County, and a Mr. Hannon, a carriage maker in Orion Pike County. I will give a reward of $150 for the delivery of said Charles, if caught in Alabama, to me on my plantation in Jefferson County, Georgia, or $75 for his apprehension and delivery in any safe jail so that I can get him in possession. One thing that this article says that we have to understand, blacksmith was a trade that was taught, and it was definitely a very garnered trade to have. Pricely, they invested this in you, and if you was good, they didn't want you beat, they didn't want you dead. This man wants you back. Because as you can see, he got hired out across many other enslavers to work for them. He brought in a good penny for this man, and now he was supposed to be going to Florida. So before Tiffany does her spiel for me, had to go back and look at Charles. Charles was born in North Carolina in 1870, he said, but his home in 1870 was Williamsburg, Jefferson, Florida. So whatever happened, he ended up was taken back to Florida. And by 1880, he was still living in Jefferson, Florida, and made that his home. But he said now his birthplace in 1880 was Georgia. Why they give the varying of these birthplaces, it's something to be trying to understand and researched. So now I want you guys to search for the name Hooten. You don't have to choose Florida, but for Florida, I have no matches. I have DNA that I get to manage of my brother, James Barr, or myself. And we have no Hootens in Florida, but I want Tiffany to share with us the backstory to the Hooten name that she has thus far.
Okay, so the Hootens were originally I have to speak on the slave owner first so you can understand. The Hooten, a slave owner name was Henry Hooten. He was from Bertie County, North Carolina. In February of 1807, he came to a present day Upson County, Georgia, Taylor County, Georgia. He brought only 7 slaves with him when he came to Georgia. One of those was one of my direct ancestors named Hampton Hooten, was his father. And along that time, they stayed there for a long time. There's actually a national monument there where my family's still there. It's called Hooten. While they were there, they started mixing with the Native Americans and having children. At some point, Henry Hooten decided, and his son, James B. Hooten, who you saw in that previous slide that owned Charles Hooten, they moved to Macon County, Alabama. And they stayed there to the end of slavery. When slavery was over with, my ancestor, Hamp Hooten, went back to Taylor County, Georgia, and they continued to have children. And again, my family's still there and still in that same place. And it's still kind of unclear. I believe that I have a lot of Hootens and Wooten names. I didn't know prior to meeting Deborah to even look up the name Wooten, but James B. Hooten after slavery did move to Texas. So I'm not sure what part because I kind of stopped looking, but definitely I can't, when you're from the South, names become something else. So I don't even know if we started out as Wooten and became Wooten or is it the reverse. So I really don't know. So you have to, that has been a hard part with research. Like even family names, even my own family, I can't understand what they're saying sometimes. So sometimes you really have to clarify nicknames. Like in some of my things, I write down nicknames because some of our family members, they went by nicknames, not their real names. So you really have to, dive in deep and kind of figure out, names because we change them a lot. So, and that is just my storyline and how I'm related to Deborah. And I have, just for clarification, I have over 80 matches for Wootens, and I haven't even, till today, actually looked, so I don't even know kind of where to start, but I'm mainly Wootens. That is mainly my connection that I know.
You are all of them, like the rest of us. So, with a show of hands, come off camera, who has Hooten matches?
How do you raise your hand?
You come off camera and raise your hand.
No, I don't know how to do that, but I do have Hootens.
Okay.
And the one that caught my eye is in Pulaski County, Kentucky. This is a white person. This is a white person that I match with in Pulaski County. I have a lot of matches out of that county. So
no African connection with them at all?
Probably so, but the one that pops up was a lone Hooten. There, she's spelling it 2 different ways.
Look at the origin to see if she has any African descent.
Okay, let me see. By the way, her last name is Green.
Okay. So I've seen greens floating around. I have seen greens. Emily,
okay, let me see what her origin is.
Okay, let me see who else. So Emily has Hooten.
I do have her. Let's see. All right, origins. There we go. All right, so she's 28% Scottish and 62% Norwegian. So she's mainly European.
So she has no African, right? Okay.
Yeah. So somewhere in the line, one of her grandparents is in my. That's where that's coming in. So okay. Somewhere along the right.
Okay.
But Pulaski County, I have a lot of relatives that came out of there to Texas.
Does anyone have matches to Hootens with any African origin at all? Just checking. Not just straight white, because the straight white, like he says, is going to go way further up that tree. And one of their ancestors decided to have sex with slaves, so we're connected.
Yeah, look. Okay. Well, let me see who I matched with her. let me look, and I can tell you.
Don't do the shared matches right now.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I mean, but now you know what to look for and what to do. But
Yeah.
you got to find that ancestral connection to understand the shared matches. Because I do that. I look at shared matches and it's like, I don't know what these names are because I haven't built up my connection to that person good enough to understand who in their family married who and what the names are. But we're still related. Okay. All right. So no one else has any. People have matches to Hootens. With raise your hand with Zoom. Who has matches to Sweatt? Sweatt.
I do.
Okay, you said sweet.
Yeah, we know you have matches.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah.
Has matches. Okay.
I do.
Sweet.
Yep.
Hello?
Tia has Sweatt. Okay, awesome. I heard Rodney has Sweatt. Okay. Yep. And so what I share with that Sweatt connection, if you have Sweatt, you're gonna have Wooten. And if you have Wooten, you're gonna have that ancestral connection like I have. And Emily has Sweatt. Emily's gonna have everything. Always know that. If you ever hear me talk about Emily's gonna always match everything.
Delbert?
Yes.
In fact, when I did my Sweatts, my Sweatt connection is connected to another family called Pettiford.
Yes.
And a Pettiford married a Lucille Richardson.
Yes.
So that's how my Richardsons connect to the Pettifords, connected to the Sweatts.
Yep. Pettiford is definitely a name that as you go further back and you see the wives that married, because I have Pettifords now that I started adding people into my tree. And now I can understand those connections. So definitely. Okay.
How do you spell Pettiford?
Pettiford is one way. I think for dominance, it could be with a D. Pediford. Pettiford.
Okay.
But I think the Ttiford was the spelling. Okay. So Harper. So go search and see if you have any Harper matches. So the Harper name for me is coming through a higher level. Agnes's sister. So either Agnes' sister, what I believe is Agnes, I used to think Agnes married a man named Alfred. But because of these matches, these matches did not align with that theory. These matches aligned with Agnes actually being, I believe, a child under the Harper surname. Yes, Tiffany.
No, I thought you said raise your hand if you have Harper.
So, okay, so were you aware you had Harper?
Yes. I knew that.
Okay. Does anyone else, Rodney has Harper? Anyone else have Harper?
I have Harper.
I have Harper's also.
I see Audrey got all kind of hands going though. So the theory with the Harpers, and that's how come I had to realign my thinking, right? Because if you guys are relating to Harpers, and my DNA match here has an Isaac Harper out of Dale County, Alabama, born 1835. And I said, okay, if Erica Dunn has this Isaac Harper person, and I think I had one other, Chris and Van not Alfred, they had James. I said, they can't be only children of Agnes's. They must be siblings. So so my screen looks weird. I understand that visually. The enslaver is still the Wooten line. But I don't know, is it through Alfred? Is Alfred, I think Alfred married into the line. And this is why. If you see after the end of his name, I wrote SC, meaning South Carolina. I think this Alfred line is coming out of South Carolina, and he hooked up with Agnes. And so we're descending somewhere where this Alfred man is a descendant of this Wooten man, and it must be a child of the enslaved person that was a Wooten. I should have wrote Wooten, not Hooten. So I believe that Alfred and Agnes are siblings. So this looks weird because I had to change my thinking. And what happens is I attach the enslavers to all of them. So sometimes they look like they're children of people when they're not. I call them guardians because they're slaveholders of the family, even if we're related. So you all have these matches to Harper because somebody that was a Wooten had to have sex with a slave, and we are descendants of that slave connecting through Wooten. It's the only way this makes sense. And either I'm connecting to Audrey or some of you from Mr. Wooten by way of this Harper slave, but at the end of the day, we're connecting some kind of way to this Harper person. And that's just something that needs to be vetted more deeper. Like I said, I thought that Alfred and Agnes married and they had a daughter, but my new research looking at these DNA matches doesn't align with that theory. And the fact that you all have Harpers don't align with that theory. So it's important to see your trees and to see the DNA matches and to see how to make that part of it make sense. Okay. So I think we've done Hootens. So these are my matches to Hootens. Tiffany has given us her talk on the Hooten background. But this person, Janice Baldwin Williams, who is a match to me, is actually a match to me on my maternal and my paternal. And again, my paternal is coming out of Jamaica, Barbados, and England and the UK. So what I'm showing you here is that Hamp Hooten, which is Tiffany's line, Tiffany, Hamp Hooten, somewhere is a double match to me. Tiffany, you're a triple match to me. Jesus.
I'm ready to do 4 ways.
At a minimum 3, you got to tell me the 4th, because in order for Anderson's line to be related to me, this young lady named Janice is related to Anderson. I have to figure out where the paternal match comes from because I know the maternal is Hooten, connected to Mr. Wooten through Hamp. And so, again, the reason why I could stand on these Wootens is because Relative Finder has helped me. But beyond that, I've done the paper trail matching research as well, which is very vitally important. So on the left, I'm showing Hamp was born 1790. Hamp married Bessie. This looks like Hamp is a child, but Bessie is a child. I just don't know if it's Hamp or is it Bessie that our DNA is through. Hamp is a strong possibility, but it could be Bessie, Tiffany.
Yeah. So I have slave records for Hampton Hooten.
Okay, that have him tied to the Hooten line.
Yes.
Okay. And actually, she was from Virginia. Where was Hamp born?
It does not say. I'm going to assume North Carolina because
Okay.
it was owned by Arrington Hooten, who is the son of Henry.
Yeah, okay. So Betsy was probably brought in, so she was a wife and not the Hooten line that connects to us like that. So that's helpful to know. Okay. So Betsy is a wife. I can take her off. But then we have Hamp, Agnes born 1805, Charles, which is the one that the news article was talking about, where it said his mother and family were taken to Alabama and he was sent to Florida. So this is how these names line up. The Hootens is lining up with this connection to Wooten. And then Warren Hooten is another name that I found through a record. So Hamp's mother has to be the Wooten, Tiffany. In order for you to be matching Wootens and us to be matching them on the session tonight, our lines have to be the slave person who was a Wooten, not a Hooten, but a Wooten.
Well, I can't say this. Like, I don't know if everybody can see me on camera, but like someone said earlier that their Hootens were more European. I am really dark compared to the other Hootens, if that makes sense. So
Ain't nobody hearing that.
I'm just telling you, right?
Well, we're talking about 1770 connections compared to your 1980 something.
Yes, but that's for the like. Don't look at don't look for an African American match. Is what I'm telling you for Hootens.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. But we have to look for the.
But I do have African American matches for Hoots.
Okay.
No, that's awesome because I don't have a lot, but again, DNA distributes randomly. We must remember that. So we can't assume that we're going to have a plethora of matches when we're back here looking for these connections from the 1700s and they were through the enslavement. You may not have pages upon pages. If your family took a test, you're going to have cousins upon cousins. But we're researching enslavement in this talk to find this connection to each other. And it's coming from the enslaver, and because of him, we're related. He went over here and had sex. He went over there and had sex. His son decided that he wanted to have a tryst. You know, so we have to let the DNA dictate those connections. And that's why DNA is vital in helping us to figure this piece out. Yes, Miss Audrey.
Yes. When you had your one chart up and you had Edward Wooten out of Virginia / Tennessee, I think that you had like 1770 something. Well, anyhow, I had traced my third great grandfather back to Blackwater community in Surrey County, Virginia. And I found the Emancipation Papers where, and I'm assuming that's a slave owner. And I'm assuming that he was white. And he had a list of his slaves that he was freeing, and he even had the years that that they were supposed to be set free. Now I had matched several DNA with whom I think, and it's still for me a potential fourth great grandfather and a fifth great grandfather. Cause I'm like maybe like 90% sure, but if I can't get to that 98 or 99, I had to leave them in my shoebox, or I had to just leave them as potential. And see, that's my brick wall is verifying.
Post the meeting, share the link so that some of us, we can look at that record, and then I can dissect that record with the lines that I've created, and then I can look at that probate record. That's why it's important not just to look at one record. You need to look at the children's records. I track if a slave was given to 5 kids, I'm tracking all 5 kids.
Yes.
Who married who? Where did you go? Where did you die? Your husband brought slaves in. You took slaves in. What's the potentiality that who is the parent relating to us as a cousin? Because those slaves came together through that marriage. So we're not going to be related to both of them just because of the name. So that's why you see here Agnes and Alfred. They're not related. One of them is the other person that came into the marriage. I just have to figure out the who. And many times I look at where was he born and where was the cluster of the family born to help me discern, okay, you got married in. Donna, why you want remote control on my computer? You doing too much. Yes, Donna.
So, with Trinity Hooten on Ancestry.
You are related to a Trinity Hooten.
Yeah, but she's my only Hooten match.
So does she have a public tree?
I believe she does.
If you guys find any public trees, share those links in the chat. What I will do is go back after this is done in this session, or unless I'll talk to Audrey, I can share the information like GEDmatch information or tree links. And we can use those same tree links that you have a match to. That's that triangulation conversation that I had. Your matches and my matches, and we know we match, whether it's Ancestry or GEDmatch, we can try to see the commonalities. And that's why these kind of sessions are important. Another thing I'll tell you is this would we could punt this to another session that's a working session or other sessions because this is so new to you guys. For me, let me just say for me, not that it's totally new to you. And for some of you, it is. I want to help you to gain a confidence of adding those people to your tree. At that 98%, you could always delete them. But I pretty much rarely delete people out of my tree because I'm learning the strong connections are there. And if Family Search has put that information up there, they've already vetted it for the most part. If another service has vetted that information and they're giving you all the records that have been researched, we pretty much can trust that with, I'm going to say, a 90% level of confidence. So WikiTree, I kind of lean on WikiTree stronger than I lean on these new family trees and ancestry. I compare the two, but I'll use WikiTree to help strengthen that family line. And many times when I'm trying to build a tree, I go to WikiTree, type in the name, see what they have, and I add each person that's on WikiTree. And I will add WikiTree as a link for the reference. So there's all these things that we can do to help us to stand confidently in the information that we're adding to our tree, knowing we're still researching. Okay. So I did want to share, there was a conversation about shared matches. Janice Baldwin, who's on my mom's side and my dad's side, when I look at her shared matches, there are 7 pages. I don't have 7 pages just under what I search for, but from her, there's 7 pages of matches that I have to vet, and they are maternal and they are paternal. So these are the things, we're paying extra for Pro Tools, some of us, but these are the things that we get by paying extra, and I'm trying to get all that I can out of this so I can stop paying. I can add them to my tree and stop paying. But utilizing these tools, thinking differently or methodologically about how we're going about adding people to the tree. Once you start adding those people, these matches start making sense and the names make sense. Okay. So this is my match to Tiffany. So I reached out to her. So what you're seeing in this visual at the top, where it has Charlie Walden. I knew for a fact the Walden is a name that connects to Wiggums. That Wiggum name is my name I shared with you guys earlier. So it appeared that in Georgia, not necessarily Jefferson, Georgia, but a Wiggum, eventually Thomas Walton married Ora Walton, but Ora was a descendant of Hootens. And when I looked at her tree, she had the name Edge. So now search to see if you have matches to the name Edge. Because Edge apparently married into the Hootens. And I was like, I've never seen this name, but when I searched for the name Edge, I had at least one match. And they were white. And I am baffled. Because where do I put a white person that's an Edge in my full, what I think is a full tree? But when we go further back, because they were the first people here to America, right? As their children started descending across the land, dropping kids everywhere, I mean, at the end of the day, we probably are mostly all related, but we just have to do the work to figure that part out. I might not be relating to Tiffany through Edge, but her connection at least allows me to look deeper at my edge. And what I will do, I have added Tiffany to my tree, which is what you see. Her name is added to my tree. And now I can go add whatever I want in my tree, building off of what she had. And she may never add Wiggums, but she's going to add Wiggums because I'm going to show her how. And that's where later I'm going to show another slide or so. I'm getting to the end here. I'm getting to the end.
Delpha?
Yes, Rodney.
You mentioned the surname of Edge.
Yes.
And what I did while you were talking so eloquently is I went on Ancestry and I just typed in the surname Edge. I have an African American person called Me 108 who is a match to me through the edges.
You would want to look in the tree and see if they're in Georgia.
Huh?
Look in the tree and see if they're in Georgia. That's where Tiffany's line is right now. And also look at their origin.
Yeah.
But this Edge name is not a name I'm versed on. And from Tiffany, hers is a working theory, but I think she has matches to Edge, and so that's just something that needs to be vetted. What I will share with you about Tiffany's tree, right? So when you look at her tree, you see Charlie Walden in red at the top. And then when I looked at her census record for Charlie, she stopped at the 1870 census, and I believe the oldest in a house was 12 years old. So as I looked at the census, and I was like, no. I looked at the next house that was before it. The youngest person in that house was 16. The next person might have been about 18 until you saw parents. So I said to her, Tiffany, that Charlie was not in a house with just children. The next house is the family. So we want to make sure we're looking above and below, especially when we have a house where a name is alone or their children. So, and I said to her, Tiffany, see if you have Wiggum. So this is her father, her grandfather, and her great aunt's line. But her great aunt had a name, Wiggum, that she was related to. And I said you would, because Waldens are basically the Hannahs had slaves, gave the slaves to Walden's daughter married a Wiggum. That's my line. And that 1% black, I don't know if I shared that earlier, but that 1% black came from the research that in the Wiggum line, a Wiggum's, Letitia Wiggum was actually a free person of color who passed. And her line connects to Gibson's, connects to POU, Poes, and connects to Bobos out of South Carolina. So there's so much crossing that's happening with our lines, right? That Tiffany would need to research Gibson's, Napier, and Bobo and Poes, POU. I would even say any of you, because if you're having some possible connections to these names, you're having more than one DNA match to a cousin. Our matches are not singular, they're plural because our families are separated. So, okay. So this was just showing her two different separate matches, connections that she has to me. Leslie. So I would say search for the name Leslie. So someone had asked me, I think it was Benita. She has a V in her name. She asked me, she saw that in the video I had done that I was related to Lanika Swoop. And I was versed with Lanika, and this was Lanika's daughter or child, I believe. So there's Lanika, and there's this AT Bruce. So you want to search to see if you have Leslie, Laslie. Eventually, another variation is Leslie, Leslie. So for Lanika, she was a descendant of Emily Leslie, who was a daughter of my Agnes Harper. And the research that I had done a couple years ago was that this Angus Leslie was the father who was the enslaver. So that's the connection to that Leslie line. I'm also related to Leslie's out of Barber County, Alabama, and they're white and Indian. And so in the previous video I had done years ago, I'll share my channel. I had dissected the relationship to the Leslies in her line because her and her husband were related, and I was more relating to her husband, but through GEDmatch, I was related to her too, since they're both related. So there's all that complexity. But when you take your time and research one line at a time, and we talk to each other, we can figure that out. Okay, so the question is, so AT Bruce. So after I share this, I want you to tell me who has Leslie's or Leslie connection. AT Bruce, as you can see again, is sharing that he's a fourth or half third cousin one time removed. No, he's not. He's somewhere near 8 generations. He's somewhere near, no, he's near 5, 6. He's somewhere near 5, 6, or 7 generations. But there's no African American. So when I say African, I mean your African descent. He has no African descent, but he has Leslie in his tree. I'm baffled. So what this says to me, that based on his tree, everyone in his entire tree is from Scotland. No one ever migrated to America in this line, in this DNA connection I have. So I said, okay, well, no one ever came to America to live. Someone came and visited some cousins or some relatives, had a tryst, went back to their native country, and thus, so now I have to think differently about this Leslie name. Because how am I related to Leslie if it was not through my 4th great grandmother's daughter? This is higher than that. So now I have to rethink my Leslie connection, and it might be my 5th great grandmother's mother. That's where I think this is hidden. I think this has to be a connection to my 5th great grandmother's mother, my 4th great grandmother's grandmother. There is no way that I'm relating to Leslie's like this. So that's why we have to understand the tools that are out there, because if you think about a 4th cousin, that would be a 5th to 6th generation, but I have to go by the dates and the years. And so it's complex. It is complex, but when we can figure out these DNA matches and add them to our tree, it becomes fun, at least for me. At least for me. All right, who has matches to Leslie or Leslie?
I have matches to Leslie. I match with Jack Leslie, and he's in Rusk County, Texas.
You and your Texas connections. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I'm related to Tiffany. Comes in there with me also. Tiffany,
Yep.
she's looking for the Wootens.
Yep. So what
I think I know where her Wootens are.
So that's one reason why we have to build the enslavers' trees, because we can see who migrated to another state and to another place, and then we can understand how slaves got removed from one place, planted in another, and where those connections could possibly be coming from. But it's helpful for us to all talk to each other. So Audrey, you don't have any Leslies or Leslies? We got to get you in Gid match.
I have Leslie's.
You do.
Delver.
Okay. I told you.
I have Leslie's, but they're all white.
Emily and Rodney gonna have everything.
No, mine are African American.
Interesting. That's cool.
I have a James Alberti out of Texas.
Oh, that was a Leslie or Leslie?
Leslie, Leslie. He's African American.
Okay.
Where's he at?
And I have a Lori Dawson Pleasance that's African American out of that's Leslie. Let me make sure where she is.
That's a Texas. Okay.
Well, she goes back to Barbados, West Indies.
Interesting. Okay.
Where is the Leslie in Texas? You have did they put the Leslie in, where they are in Texas?
I opened up the tree. My Naomi Lucille Leslie was born in Enterprise, Texas. MT Enterprise, Texas.
Mount Enterprise.
Mount Enterprise, Texas.
Rusk County.
Put the link in the tree. The tree link in the chat. Put the tree link in the chat.
Delbra.
Yes.
You said that me and Emily got everybody.
Got everybody.
I represent that.
The Ryan Leslie, my third cousin first removed.
Who had Ryan Leslie?
I do.
Atia?
Yes.
Okay. So as we can see, right, we're hitting different names as far as matches return. Once we get you guys, eventually that conversation is going to come up in Jet Match, right? Now we can triangulate much more deeper understanding of relationships. because Ancestry cuts off those matches where we don't get to see the lower matches, we don't get to understand a deeper connection. Okay, you're gonna go search for wood. So
Oh,
my
yeah, I know I'm related to Woods all day long.
so my wood line goes through this line here, William Wood, his father, William Sr. Um, all of this. So Agnes had a son, Alexander Wood. Alexander was mulatto. He was listed as mulatto on the census. So I knew I was looking for a white person. Um, until I started really looking at DNA for the longest up until last year, I focused only on records. I paid attention to my grandmother's line. I built her line with records. My father's line, because I shared with you, I had to figure out who Paul was. I finally started looking at DNA. But I work every day, all day in software. So understanding websites and software and utilizing one into another, integrating, that's a gift that I feel I have, that I'm not afraid of these websites. I'll do whatever I got to do till it breaks. Yes, Miss
Miss
Tiffany.
Brown,
Wait a minute. Yes, Tiffany. Her hand was raised.
Miss Brown,
Wait a minute. Tiffany had her hand raised. Okay, she must have put it down. Who's calling me, Miss Brown?
Jerry Moore,
Yes, Mr. Moore.
Jerry Harris Moore. In some side, on my mother's side of the family, I found out that some of the slaves here in Arkansas, some took the name of the slave master, and some did not.
Mm-hmm.
So there were two groups of one name. Let's say Norwood, who was the owner,
Mm-hmm.
and so one Norwood married another Norwood, but they were not blood.
Right.
So that happens a lot too. Did that happen in your research? Have you found that to be the case, that they had the same last name but they were not blood related? They only took the name.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You had not mentioned that, and one that's very important. I'm a sociologist, so I look at things, and a historian, so I have degrees in both, and so it really gets, I look at it two different ways.
It's important to know that. That's very true.
Right. What really shocked me, I'll be brief. What really shocked me that I did not know that I had any Wooten connection until I did the DNA test. And this Wooten is above my brother and sister. They have the same mother, but he's on my father's side in Kansas City, which is and Oklahoma, which is I'm trying to find out, and and like I have several. He is 400 and some centimorgans higher than my brother and sister, and no one, and I can't find the connection. The only connection I have is that they lived within a block of each other in Kansas City, Kansas, and went to the same church there in Kansas City, Kansas. And that's the first time I ever heard anything about a Wooten or anything. And I was just flabbergasted. I was just really, my dad died when I was 9 months old of tuberculosis. His mother died 10 years before that of tuberculosis. So I get all these Wooten connections in my DNA, and I don't know how it's connected. And no one, and then what really gets me is that those of us who do research and these people do the DNA test and do not have a public tree. Yeah. So that's been my blockage. Arthur Wooten do not have a public tree, so it cuts everything off. So that's something I think I want to mention to the group.
Okay.
And sometimes when they don't have a public tree, you have to build one for them.
Yeah.
That's how you breach that wall.
Oh, okay.
But another thing that's true, another thing you can do, I do a lot. That's how come I said if they don't have a tree, I've learned to be okay for right now because I'm paying for Pro Tools. I go look at shared matches to that person. Because when you do that, you can now see who's related to them and build through that.
Okay.
Build a
Okay.
tree through that. And so literally, the $10 a month, when you get bang for your buck out of that, you know, and if you set a time period that financially benefits you, sign up and you go look for all those private names that are Wooten and look for the shared matches. And I'll show how you can sort it by the relationships to them. You see brothers and nieces and cousins, different things, and that's how you can try to figure that out.
There are the Wootens that has a public tree, and we have connected and been talking for the last 2 years. So I have that connection, and they know the person that I'm talking about.
Gotcha.
So you know, it's not.
Yeah.
He didn't stop it, but I understand. But I have talked to him on the telephone, and so you know.
It's hard when it's hard for them to accept the truth that was what happened.
Well, yeah, even in my hometown, in the hometown where my dad was born in Oklahoma.
Where are you at? Where are you at in Arkansas, in Oklahoma?
Bentonville.
Where at?
Bentonville. Walmart.
Yeah, I know. Bentonville. Okay. I know
yes. I'm down the street from Walmart headquarters.
I know exactly where you are.
Okay, where are you?
How are you connected to Oklahoma?
My father was born in Clairview, Oklahoma. My great grandfather was born in Idabel.
Idabel, there you go. That's all right. That's for
so the
Idabel.
Two of you need to talk.
All right, so pardon?
The two of you need to talk.
Okay,
I know we need to talk.
Add Verna to that. She's from Oklahoma too.
Okay,
my
okay.
email is on the chat.
Well, I'll get with Deborah. I talk to her all the time, so I need to talk to you. Well, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You're gonna talk to him now. Did you have a comment or a question?
Well, Mr. Norris left, but he probably really needs to connect with me.
Yes.
Because I am a Woods, and Russ County, Texas is where the Wootens that I'm connected to are from.
Okay.
And I am from Oklahoma. However, I do not believe that I am a direct descendant of the Wootens. I believe that it was because of being married into the generations prior, being married into the Wooten family. However, I do have lots of Wooten connections, but they are all married in, mainly through Wilsons.
Okay.
I am connected to Humphreys. No Sweetts, no Hooten. No Hootens, but I do have Hortons.
Okay. I haven't seen that name as a variation. I'm gonna show something with you and Eunice and Audrey at the end. So let me go. So I think you guys have been searching for woods. You get that part. I'm just showing how my woods basically is white because I said my third great grandfather was actually mulatto in 1870, and his wife was mulatto. She was a Stratford, I believe. So this is just showing that I have 4 pages of shared matches from this one match, and she has no African descent. So that would line up with me saying my wood connection is through Scottish, because there's no European. So we gotta stop saying Europeans because some of them are just Scottish or Irish. But another thing I will share real quick, when you look at the calculations of her numbers, I asked someone on Facebook for Ancestry, why do this not add up to 100? They're able to turn some of the numbers off. I don't know how they get to turn off some of those calculations, but maybe this only shows the one that they match with us. So my brother only has 1% Scotland, 1% Irish, connecting with her. So now I know when I'm trying to figure out my Scotland, my Irish connection, that I could be pushing it through woods in the ancestral line that are the woods. So, okay. So this was just the common ancestor to wood that looks like it was going through William Wood and the whole wood line, that the matches would be Phillips and Jenkins and a few other names, Cates. Cates, or Randalls, because they would now be my direct connections. And then I do have some unknown matches. We all will. Lula Wooten in Texas. Was born in Kentucky, went to Texas, so maybe I'm more relating to, I think there was a Kentucky, and she was born 1863. So maybe it's her ancestors that I would need to investigate. So we're always going to have these matches that we don't know. Okay, Jet match. If you do not have your DNA in Jet match, this is why you're going to want to put your DNA in Jet match. So in Jet match, it's free. You can turn off the option to have your DNA be used for police purposes. There is a opt-out option after you do that. But what you would do is through Ancestry or whatever testing platform where you built a tree, download your DNA, your tree and your DNA. Download your DNA. You're going to get a file, and then you're going to upload that file to GEDmatch. And after it processes, they're going to give you what's called a kit number. So all of these names on the lower left are the kits that I'm managing. I'm grateful that these people took a test, but they don't log in whatsoever. And I get to use their test to figure out and triangulate my matches to other people. So I get to manage certain kits. GEDmatch is free, but there are features that you can pay for $50 a year if you choose, but it is free. Okay. So Audrey. So
Yes.
I took Audrey's GEDmatch ID. I have a project, and what we're going to want you guys to think about is we're going to encourage, I'm going to work with Audrey, where we're going to create a post, and we need 50 people to give GEDmatch IDs, and then for her to create her first project for the World of Wootens. And once she has 50 GEDmatch IDs, I probably showed you 10, that she can add to the kit, to the project. Now she will create a project, and now we can compare our matches to each other. So in GEDmatch, I added her to my Alabama group because I have a group. I want to see how she lines up with my other cousins that I know. So what I'm showing you here is this first icon with the trees. She has uploaded her tree from Ancestry or wherever she uploaded. So now I get to see her tree if I don't have access to see her DNA in Ancestry, which I don't. And looking at her tree, I can see now she has a Pinckney Wooten in Mississippi, who had a son named George in Mississippi. And so now I can look at her tree and try to figure out how I'm going to be relating to her. There's many other tools you can use in GEDmatch. So there's a tree column. Next to the tree column are the chromosomes. What I'm showing you here with the list numbers you see, I'm sorting all of my matches in the project by what's called the most recent common ancestor. Who is the closest connection I have to her? Well, the most recent common ancestor, these chromosomes didn't start 1, 2, 3, 4. They started 7, 12, 13, 14, 18, 20, then restarted 1, 2, 5, 6. As I've been looking at this last year, I'm like, I think I'm double related to her because the common ancestor connection started over. I've seen it start over 3 times. So this alludes to me that I may have more than one connection to Audrey just because GEDmatch is sorting this information in this way. The last column that you see here next to the email address that's not shown is called the MERCA, most recent common ancestor. This literally is supposed to be telling you what position you're going to find at least one of your ancestors. So at the 6th generation, 6.5 generation is where me and her connection is going to be. So that means if I count starting with that little hidden, that's the 1st generation. The next column of tick marks is 2nd. George is 3rd. Pinckney is 4th. So I'm missing Pinckney parents, grandparents, and other grandparents to find our connection. So there's more work that I got to do to work with her, or we work together to figure out how to break through that big wall. But I already know, based on these connections, probably somebody white. You just now got to add the white folks.
Yeah.
And we'll look at the DNA of Wootens, and if you have anybody white, there it is. And so now Pinckney was probably a child of a slave, and now you connect the white folks and the slave, and that's how you start bridging those connections. Okay, so this was Audrey. This is, I believe it's Verna. This is Verna. So Verna, I shared my DNA with her. In the upper left is showing the exact position where we would be matching as far as the DNA centimorgans. What position, and the start and the end is just like 1 to 10, 11 to 20. Well, the start and the end position is where I'm going to match her. I'm going to show you another tool where visually GEDmatch will sort these matches and you can see literally who's matching. So when you're in a project, it makes it so much easier to see where that cluster is at of the relationship. So for Berna, she has John Hooten, Corrine, and Beulah. I'm matching her in the same position, 6.45. I'm telling you, there's somebody white. We're hitting at the same place. And this is why it's small chromosomes, centimorgans, because it's going so far back and it's white connections, and then it didn't recreate from that line. It recreated from the enslavers, the African American line. So we only got a sliver, but it was still the enslaver. So helping her to bridge going further back from John Wooten, got to figure out his location. But also, like Audrey, I believe I'm related twice to Verna, and got to figure that out. Okay. Then Tiffany. So now what I'm showing you is GEDmatch and DNA Painter. And what happens with DNA Painter, you add some of the information from GEDmatch to a tool called DNA Painter, which is free. You can paint one tree for free. But what I choose to do is add cousins, because I don't know who our matches are as far as ancestors. So I add all of my cousins to my DNA Painter, and now this is sorting this cluster. And DNA Painter will do this also, where you don't have to manually do this. But I love DNA Painter as a tool. So now when I look at the matches for Tiffany, I literally see I have other cousins. Tiffany is related to the Leslies, who are white, part Indian. So that could be where the Indian is coming from, Tiffany. She's relating to Carol Blower. Carol is a cousin on my father's side, but she's on my mother's side because she's from England. So her father was Jamaican and her mother was from England. So Carol Blower on here is related to me twice on both sides. So when I see how my cousins are matching and how we're grouped together, this is how we could try to figure out the matches. So I'm just showing you another presentation of how the DNA can help us to figure it out, but it starts from GEDmatch. This is Tiffany, and Norris and Tiffany are in here, but Greg Dansby is in here. Greg is out of South Carolina, and that name is Cook and Stratford's. I think they run into the polls in that name I was talking about earlier. So this is how we're able to use the DNA to help us figure out our connections using different tools. And this is just another presentation of Audrey and Tiffany are matching. And Lavada Williams, if you don't know Lavada, that is Kathy Marshall. Have you heard the name Kathy Lynn Marshall? That's her ancestor. And so there's a few other people that I've gotten their DNA added to my DNA Painter. So now I can look at these matches. And if I ever call you and say, search for Wiggum, this is why. Because these clusters are starting to form. And I can pretty much have an understanding how I'm related to you. So that is it. So questions, feedback, go.